Welcome into the Cam Rogers Show on this Friday, ladies and gentlemen. I am Cam Rogers. We thank you for tuning into this fine program presented by BETDSI and FanDuel. Let's kick things off with the latest NFL headlines out there. Everybody in Pittsburgh can breathe easily. Antonio Brown does not want a trade. In fact, he said obviously he doesn't want to be traded and that he was just angry about an old Steelers employee calling him out on Twitter. Now, Brown made his first public statements on Wednesday following missing team meetings on Monday, which further fueled the Antonio Brown trade rumors out there. Now, Drew Rosenhaus, Brown's agent, dispelled of the notion that Brown wanted a trade and that he missed Monday's team meetings due to a personal matter. Now, obviously, the Steelers need Antonio Brown now than ever before. Pittsburgh is 0-1-1 on the season after tying the Cleveland Browns in Week 1 and then getting out-dueled by Patrick Mahomes in Week 2 at Heinz Field. So Antonio Brown obviously crucial to this Pittsburgh offense, probably the #1 wide receiver in the National Football League. And just to see Antonio Brown go to Twitter and mention the word trade was somewhat surprising for me to see here, and it gave you the sense that maybe Pittsburgh had the sky falling at one point because Le'Veon Bell, of course, is not there. Antonio Brown is talking trade on Twitter. Ben Roethlisberger has been Jekyll and Hyde so far this season. He was bad in Week 1, but he was good in Week 2. What are you going to get from Ben Roethlisberger in Week 3 against an upstart Tampa Bay Buccaneers team? Very much up in the air. So Antonio Brown hopefully has cooled down a little bit here because, of course, you probably saw the footage of him going after his offensive coordinator during Week 2's loss against the Kansas City Chiefs. So something's going on with the locker room right now, and I will add on that Mike Freeman of Bleacher Report released a rumor that perhaps Mike Tomlin is losing the locker room. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. All right, folks, you should be playing Antonio Brown on FanDuel this week. Go ahead and sign up, FanDuel.com/chatsports. When you throw down $5, you get 20 for free. $25 in total in that back pocket. Go ahead and play Antonio Brown with confidence this week against a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that is a little rickety in the back end there. All right, interesting story here, folks. Colin Kaepernick could be signing with the Oakland Raiders or New England Patriots as soon as next week, at least if you ask Colin Kaepernick's attorney, Mark Geragos. So he told TMZ Sports that perhaps there could be big news next week for Colin Kaepernick. Now, this is not the first time we've heard this from Geragos. He has said before that big news is coming, and really the news isn't all that huge. Now, Geragos said, quote, "I would just say stay tuned that next week there may be some news." Now, there is the quarterback depth chart in Oakland if you include Colin Kaepernick. You got Carr as your #1 guy, of course. A.J. McCarron comes on over via a trade. And you got to wonder if Colin Kaepernick could actually compete with McCarron to be the quarterback #2 for the Oakland Raiders. That would be very interesting. And obviously, Kaepernick provides a little more upside than what McCarron does. Derek Carr isn't playing the best right now. Everybody's saying, oh my God, Derek Carr is overrated in all this. And of course, he's no sure thing to be healthy for the entire season either. As for New England, that would be really intriguing because if Kaepernick joins Brian Hoyer and Tom Brady and Danny Etling there on the quarterback depth chart, where exactly does Kaepernick fit there? But in the end, Colin Kaepernick is fighting the NFL right now. Of course, he has that ongoing collusion case alleging that members of the NFL are keeping him unemployed. So, in essence, what Geragos is hinting at here, Kaepernick is going to be employed by maybe either the Raiders or the Patriots and at the same time suing his employer. I don't know if that makes much sense there. I'm going to ask you guys this. Would you want Colin Kaepernick as your quarterback? So you're a tight end, maybe an offensive lineman, you're a wide receiver in the NFL. Do you want Kaepernick on your team? Do you want Cap walking around in the locker room, being a part of your team culture? Let me know. Y for yes, N for no. But this is probably the first rumor out there that has given some steam to Colin Kaepernick returning to the National Football League, something that I really don't think is a reality as we stand, but I would assume Garagos, Kaepernick's personal attorney, knows more than I do about teams that are interested in Colin Kaepernick as we stand, so we shall see. All right, next up here, no stunner, the Dallas Cowboys are the most valued franchise in the National Football League. Forbes released its list, and Dallas ranked at the top for the 12th consecutive year. By the way, they led the way by a huge margin. You take a look at the top 5 teams. There's Dallas at $5 billion. Then you got a drop-off, New England at $3.8 billion, the Giants at $3.3, Rams at $3.2, and then the Washington Redskins at $3.1. If anybody's curious about the lower-ranked teams out there, the Buffalo Bills were dead last. The Detroit Lions were towards the bottom as well. But the Dallas Cowboys remain the moneymaker in the NFL, despite only a couple of playoff appearances the last few years here. So way outranking the New England Patriots in terms of value, despite the Patriots being a stalwart in the playoffs in the NFL. It's a really interesting story there. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, Xavier Woods, safety for Dallas, is not worried about the Earl Thomas trade buzz out there that has been going on seemingly for months. The most recent development, of course, was that Dallas offered Seattle a second-round pick for Earl Thomas. Now, Xavier Woods is just coming back from an injury here, hamstring. Didn't play in week 2, didn't play in week 1. Looks like he's good to go for week 3 against Seattle. Kayvon Frazier has been starting in Woods' place here, and he's been pretty solid. Played in all 135 defensive snaps in those first 2 games. As for the Earl Thomas buzz, Woods said, quote, "The coaches know what I can do. They told me. They reassured me. I'm not worried about that at all." Now, the Earl Thomas trade buzz, I think, isn't completely dead until the trade deadline happens, because I still think there is a situation where, especially if Dallas wins this week, Seattle is out of it by the time the trade deadline comes around, and Dallas could be in it. So Dallas maybe ups the asking price, if you will, or ups the ante, and maybe offers a first-round pick, or Seattle, desperate to rebuild, dials back the asking price and maybe just asks for a third-round pick, something like that. So I could see an Earl Thomas trade still happening. As for Xavier Woods, looks like he'll be healthy to go this week against Seattle. All right, next up here on the list, no regrets for Jon Gruden in terms of the Khalil Mack trade. You know, it's interesting. Some ironic words from Mr. Jon Gruden recently saying, quote, "It's hard to find a great pass rusher." The irony, of course, Khalil Mack was formerly of the Oakland Raiders, probably the best pass rusher in the National Football League. And as we stand right now, how about this stat? The Raiders are 3rd worst in pressure rate so far this season, only ahead of the Saints and the Houston Texans. You got Seattle there at number 29 and the Cleveland Browns checking in at number 28. Meanwhile, for Khalil Mack, he has 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, an interception returned for a touchdown. I think he's doing pretty well. Meanwhile, Oakland 0-2, searching for its first win in the Jon Gruden era. Is he overrated? My good man Mitchell Renz talked about, hey, is Jon Gruden on the hot seat already? Well, obviously not from a monetary perspective. The guy is getting paid a lot for a long time. Can't possibly be on the hot seat just yet. But go ahead, type away with your votes. O for overrated, N for not overrated in terms of Jon Gruden. All right, let me know what you think. He's a polarizing guy out there in the NFL, no doubt about that. New details here about Josh Gordon and that trade that went down between the Browns and the New England Patriots. Interesting play on FanDuel this week, by the way, against the Detroit Lions. FanDuel.com/chatsports is the way to sign up, and you can get $20 for free with that first deposit of $5. The Browns believed Josh Gordon wasn't in good enough, quote, football shape before trading him to the Patriots earlier this week. That according to NFL insider Albert Breer. Now, apparently the hamstring issue was more of the last straw for the Browns than anything else. And that led to the team announcing they would release him, which was probably just a PR move so that teams would call John Dorsey and say, hey, don't cut him, trade him to me. That's exactly what happened because 8 to 10 teams called Cleveland, including the likes of the Dallas Cowboys, 49ers, and, of course, the New England Patriots. He's in great shape to the naked eye, of course, and apparently in Week 1, the Browns wanted to play Josh Gordon excessively solely to prove to him that he wasn't in football shape. That, according to the rumor out there, I'm not so sure about that. But if Hugh Jackson actually did do that, come on, Hugh, what are you doing, man? It's probably not the best way to go about it. But Gordon, now a member of the New England Patriots, our friends at BETDSI, have the over-under on 875.5 receiving yards for Josh Gordon. Where are you going? Over, -110, under, -120. You can bet, of course, on chatsports.com/bet. Do it right now. 120% deposit bonus when you use our promo code. You see it on your screen. Harris will talk about it later in the interview. Live 120, or if you're feeling it, Cam 120 as well. That is an option too. All right, so let's continue along here with the latest NFL headlines. Let's talk about Dez Bryant. Is he going to Seattle? Well, Pete Carroll was asked about it recently in light of the Doug Baldwin injury, of course, nursing that MCL. So you would think the logic is maybe Seattle gives Dez Bryant a look. After all, they did sign Brandon Marshall, for crying out loud. Pete Carroll nixed that idea, saying that he's happy with the current core of wide receivers. Now, Seattle's Will Dissly is actually playing better than Marshall and Tyler Lockett, it seems. But the Seattle Seahawks apparently aren't panicking about their 0-2 start, on the verge of 0-3, by the way, if they do lose to the Dallas Cowboys. Meanwhile, for Dez, taking his time in terms of where he's going to go next, there hasn't been much buzz about Dez Bryant going to the Pacific Northwest. I don't think it makes much sense. A, especially if Seattle continues to lose, and Dez is watching Seattle losing, and he's saying, I'm not going up there. B, salary cap is an issue for Seattle right now, so I don't think Dez and the Seahawks is a marriage that makes much sense. You see my top 5 teams there. New England, I got Cleveland on the board as well. Philadelphia, low-key, makes some sense despite signing Jordan Matthews recently. All right, so there is Dez Bryant there. Let's talk about a potential Le'Veon Bell trade. So the folks over at Fansided seem to think a Le'Veon Bell trade to the Green Bay Packers makes some sense, and they must have been watching the Cam Rogers show because I have been saying that for a couple of weeks now. If you're Pittsburgh, what's stopping you? Bell still hasn't shown up. He has basically burned the bridge with his teammates beyond repair, and he hasn't even signed his franchise tender yet. By the way, likely not going to show up until Week 10, and if you're Pittsburgh still searching for a win, you might as well deal this guy now because you're going to get, bad effort from him towards the end of the season when he actually does return. And how much motivation does Pittsburgh offensive line have to run block for this guy? So if you're the Steelers, trade Bell now. Get compensation now rather than get nothing in 2019. Go ahead and trade with the Green Bay Packers. Here's what you get. 2019 first-round pick, 2019 fourth-round pick. Green Bay Packers get Le'Veon Bell. The Packers are well-equipped with 2 first-round picks in 2019, so they can give one away and still draft in the first round next year. As for Pittsburgh, they have a healthy dose of draft capital now, and they can get Le'Veon Bell off their hands, which seems to be a thorn in their side right now, especially from a chemistry standpoint. When you look at the Bleacher Report article that came out from Mike Freeman saying that the Steelers and Mike Tomlin are losing the locker room right now. So it's not great stuff for the Steelers and what's going on internally there. Le'Veon Bell trade making more and more sense as the days go on. All right, and then finally, Alshon Jeffery, could he be back for week 4? He's recovering from a torn rotator cuff. He is expected to return by week 4 or week 5, which is important here because Philadelphia's #1 wide receiver right now is Nelson Agholor, because Mike Wallace is now on the shelf. He's dealing with an injury himself. He was put on IR. Now, there is some confidence that maybe Mike Wallace can return this season, but as for Alshon Jeffery, the Eagles are monitoring range of motion here, pain tolerance, and soreness as they continue to evaluate Alshon Jeffery. Carson Wentz is indeed back at quarterback for this week against the Indianapolis Colts, so that's good news, and Alshon Jeffery should be back wearing that Eagles uniform on the football field pretty darn soon. And as for now, the Eagles will utilize Nelson Agholor and, of course, Pro Bowl tight end Zach Ertz. He's not a bad player either.